She fed a struggling businessman at Alaba Market when he had nothing. Years later, he returned wealthy, married her, and moved her into Ikoyi. Then his siblings warned him, "Your wife has put you in a bottle and is controlling you." To prove them wrong, he faked losing everything, and her loyalty was put on trial. Alaba International Market never truly slept. Even when the sun dipped low and the traders began to pack their goods, the air still carried the smell of hot oil, pepper, diesel, and sweat. Everyone in Alaba was chasing something: profit, survival, a second chance. Tiwa was chasing dignity. She had graduated from university with hope in her chest and a folder of certificates under her bed. For 2 years after her graduation, she wore clean shirts and carried printed CVs from one office gate to another. She sat on plastic chairs in waiting rooms, smiled politely at receptionists who never looked up, and prayed silently during interviews that ended with, "We will get back to you." They never did. After a while, life stopped negotiating with her. Rent came, hunger came, bills came, and Tiwa, who had once imagined herself in a bright office with a name tag and an ID card, found herself behind a steaming pot of rice, beans, and stew in the noisy heart of Alaba. At first, she felt ashamed. Then she got tired of shame. Shame did not buy tomatoes. Shame did not pay for gas. Shame did not keep the lights on. So she built her own corner. Her food stand was small but clean. She cooked like her life depended on it, because it did. Traders began to know her as Tiwa with the sweet stew. Even some men who worked in warehouses walked extra distance just to eat from her pot. Then there was Uzo. He was not a rich man then. He was just a businessman with big dreams and tired eyes. Uzo came often. Sometimes he arrived looking calm and steady, ordering the usual with the confidence of a man who believed tomorrow would be better. Other days, he came looking like someone had poured heavy stones into his chest. Tiwa noticed everything, not because she wanted to, but because she had lived long enough in struggle to recognize it on another person's face. On those bad days, Uzo would sit quietly and stare at his plate as if the food was the only thing holding him together. And Tiwa, without making a big show of it, would serve him extra. Sometimes she would serve him and he would say softly, "I will pay when I sell today." Tiwa would brush it off like it was nothing. "Do not worry about it. Eat first." Uzo would shake his head. "You always do this." Tiwa would keep her eyes on the food. "People have done worse to me. Let me do one good thing." Sometimes Uzo would laugh, a small laugh that did not reach his eyes, and say, "If I ever make it big, I will remember you." Tiwa never believed those kinds of words. She had heard promises before. She had watched promises vanish like smoke. But still, she fed him. Weeks turned into months. Months turned into years. And Tiwa's life stayed the same. Early mornings, noisy afternoons, tired evenings, quiet nights. The dream of office work began to feel like something that belonged to someone else. One afternoon, Uzo came looking unusually tense. His jaw was clenched. His phone kept vibrating on the table. He barely touched his food. Tiwa stood over him. "Market is bad?" Uzo breathed out hard. "Bad is even an understatement." Tiwa nodded slowly, then served him without asking for money. He looked at her like he wanted to protest, but he did not have the strength. That day, when he finished eating, he stood up and paused. "Tiwa," he said quietly, "I do not know what life is planning, but I know this. You are not just selling food. You are saving people." Tiwa felt something tighten in her throat. She looked away quickly. "Go and be safe," she replied. Uzo walked away, and Tiwa watched him disappear into the market crowd. She did not know that the next time she would see him, her whole world would shake. And she also did not know that kindness, when it is real, can become a rope that pulls people up, sometimes into heaven, sometimes into fire. That night, Tiwa returned to her small room, counted her money, and sighed. She lay down and stared at her ceiling. She had helped a man today, but who would help her tomorrow? Uzo's shop was small, not the kind of shop that attracted attention, not the kind that made people stop and stare. It was tucked between two bigger electronics stores, both of them loud with banners, posters, and sales boys shouting prices into the air. Uzo did not shout. He stood quietly inside his shop, arranging cartons of air conditioners and televisions, wiping dust off boxes, checking serial numbers like a man who respected his work. Business had been slow that week, very slow. He had spent the morning calling old contacts, estate managers, site engineers, project supervisors. Most of them did not pick up. The few that did gave vague answers. Call me next week. Things are tight. We've already sorted suppliers. By midday, Uzo's shoulders were heavy. He sat on a wooden stool inside his shop, scrolling through his phone, studying price changes, exchange rates, import costs. He was not lazy. He was calculating. That was when a shadow crossed the entrance of the shop. Uzo looked up. A man stood there. He wasn't flashy, no loud clothes, no exaggerated confidence. He wore a simple long-sleeved shirt, neatly pressed, and carried a small notebook in one hand and a phone in the other. His eyes moved slowly around the shop, not judging, just observing. "Good afternoon," the man said. "Good afternoon, sir," Uzo replied, standing up immediately. The man stepped inside. He touched one of the air conditioner boxes, read the specifications, checked the brand. He walked to the television section, nodded slightly, then turned to Uzo. "Do you supply in bulk?" he asked. "Yes, sir," Uzo answered without hesitation. "How bulk?" Uzo paused for half a second, then said, "Estates, offices, housing projects." The man looked at him carefully now. "Good. That's what I'm working on." Uzo's heartbeat changed. "I'm part of a procurement team," the man continued. "Government housing project. We're furnishing an estate. Televisions, air conditioners, refrigerators, and basic electronics." Uzo felt heat spread through his chest, but he kept his face calm. "How many housing units?" he asked. 80, the man replied. "Possibly more later." 80. Uzo's mind began to run numbers immediately. Containers, import duty, transport, storage, labor, risk. "That's a big job," Uzo said slowly. "Yes," the man replied. "That's why I'm careful." The man looked around the shop again, taking in the size, the limited space, the lack of display luxury. Uzo noticed the look. "This is a small shop," Uzo said honestly. "I won't pretend otherwise." The man nodded. "So why should I trust you?" Uzo breathed in deeply. "Because I understand supply," he said. "I understand deadlines. And I understand that if I fail on a government project, my business is finished. I won't risk that." The man studied him for a long moment. "What do you need to execute this?" he asked. Uzo answered carefully. 80% upfront payment."
The man raised his head slightly.
"That's high." "Yes," Uzo agreed. "But without it, the job won't be done properly." Silence filled the shop. Then the man said, "Prepare your quotation, delivery plan, timeline." Uzo nodded. "I'll have it ready tomorrow." "My name is Mr. Kolade," the man said, handing him a card. "If this works, More work will come. When Mr. Collade left, Uzo sat down slowly. His hands were shaking. That night, Uzo did not sleep. He spread papers across his small room. He calculated costs again and again. He called suppliers at odd hours. Some rejected him. Some quoted outrageous prices. One agreed. By morning, his eyes were red, but his documents were ready. Mr. Collade reviewed everything carefully. "This is detailed," he said. "You've thought it through." He signed. 2 days later, the alert came. 80%. Uzo stared at his phone for a long time. Then he stood up and moved. Execution was chaos. Suppliers delayed. One truck broke down. Prices changed suddenly. Workers complained. Customs documentation nearly stalled one shipment. Uzo was everywhere. Warehouse, port, road, phone calls, meetings. He barely ate, barely slept, but he delivered. Every air conditioner, every television, every refrigerator, on time. When the final delivery was confirmed, Mr. Collade called him. "You did well," he said simply. The balance payment followed. Then another call came. Another estate, then another. Uzo did not jump into luxury. He reinvested, expanded carefully. By the time people noticed him, he was already established. The struggling businessman had crossed into a new life. Quietly, deliberately, and without losing himself. That morning at Alaba International Market, business was slower than usual. Tiwa stood behind her stall, stirring her pot absent-mindedly. Customers came and went, but her mind was not fully there. For reasons she could not explain, her thoughts drifted to Uzo. She had not seen him in a long time. She wondered briefly how he was doing, whether business had improved, whether life had been kind to him. The thought passed as quickly as it came. Tiwa returned to her work. Life did not pause for questions without answers. Across the city, Uzo's life no longer had quiet mornings. His day started before sunrise. Calls from site managers, procurement officers, estate developers. Meetings stacked on meetings. Emails that never ended. His staff moved around him like a machine, always waiting for instructions. The shop that once felt small now felt like a memory. Uzo had expanded carefully. After the first estate supply contract, referrals came quietly, like doors opening one after another. He delivered on time, consistently, without drama. That consistency became his reputation. Soon, Uzo was supplying multiple estates, corporate offices, and new developments. And as his money grew, he did not waste it on noise. He invested. First, he bought land. Then he built. Then he bought another. Before long, Uzo was no longer only an electronics supplier. He had entered real estate, properties, rentals, housing projects. He partnered with developers, bought into construction deals, and built a portfolio that made him stable, not just rich. People started calling him chairman. And the funny thing was, Uzo still felt like the same man sometimes, only more tired. One night, after a long meeting, Uzo sat alone in his office, staring at a document without reading it. His eyes were heavy. His head ached. His assistant knocked and entered. "Sir, congratulations again. That new property in Ikoyi is a big win." Uzo nodded absent-mindedly. "Thank you." The assistant smiled. "You always help people. Your staff respect you. You don't treat anyone like dirt." Uzo looked up slowly. "Do you think so?" "Yes, sir," the assistant said with confidence. "Not every rich man has a heart." The assistant left, and the office became quiet again. Uzo leaned back and stared at the ceiling. Not every rich man has a heart. The words hit something deep. because Uzo remembered a woman who had a heart when she had nothing. Tiwa. He saw her clearly in his mind, standing behind that small food stand, serving him on credit, brushing off his embarrassment like it was nothing. He remembered how she never mocked him, never asked him questions that would make him feel small. She fed him like he was human. Uzo's chest tightened. How long had it been? Weeks had become months. He had told himself, "I'll go when I'm less busy." But he was never less busy. Uzo sat up straight, suddenly restless. He picked up his phone as if to call her, then paused. He did not even have her number. A quiet shame washed over him. How could he have been fed by someone for so long and not even have her contact? Uzo stood up abruptly. He walked to the window and looked down at the city lights. He was rich now. He had properties now. He had influence now. But he was still carrying a debt. Not money debt. A moral debt.
And Uzo knew something.
The kind of debt Tiwa gave him could not be repaid with a casual greeting. It required honor. It required intention. He turned back into the office, grabbed his car keys, and called his driver. When the driver answered, Uzo's voice was calm but firm. "Tomorrow morning," he said, "we're going to Alaba International Market." The driver hesitated. "Alaba, sir?" "Yes," Uzo replied. "I need to see someone." Uzo ended the call and stood still for a moment, feeling his heartbeat settle. Because tomorrow was not about showing wealth. Tomorrow was about remembering the hand that fed him when the world ignored him. And in that quiet decision, the story began to turn again. The afternoon sun hung heavily over Alaba International Market when Tiwa looked up from her stall and saw a man standing quietly in front of her. At first, she thought she was mistaken. The man looked familiar, yet different. His posture was straighter, his clothes were clean and well-fitted. There was a calm confidence about him that hadn't been there before. Her heart skipped. "Uzo?" she said slowly, as if saying the name might make him disappear. "Yes," he replied gently. "It's me." Tiwa froze where she stood. "You're here?" she asked, eyes searching his face. "When did you come back?" "Today," Uzo said. "I had some things to attend to around here." She stared at him, still trying to reconcile this man with the one who used to sit quietly and eat from her stall. "You've been gone for a long time," she said. "I know," Uzo replied. "Longer than I planned." There were many questions pressing at her chest, but she pushed them aside. "Sit," she said finally, pointing to the bench. "Let me serve you." Uzo smiled and shook his head. "I didn't come to eat," he said calmly. "I came to take you out, to give you a proper treat." Tiwa blinked, caught off guard. "Take me out?" "Yes," Uzo replied. "Can you have someone attend to your customers while you're away?" She hesitated only for a moment, then nodded. "Yes, I can." She turned quickly, called out to a young woman nearby, and gave brief instructions. Within minutes, everything was settled. When she returned, Uzo was already walking. Tiwa followed him out of the market without asking further questions. She assumed they were heading toward a bus stop, so she kept quiet, trying to steady her thoughts. Then Uzo stopped. Tiwa followed his gaze. A black G-Wagon stood parked not far away, its body gleaming under the afternoon sun. Her steps slowed. She looked at the car, then at Uzo, then back at the car. Her heart began to race. "Uzo," she said carefully, "is that car—" Without answering, Uzo walked ahead and opened the passenger door. Tiwa stopped completely. Shock washed over her face. "Is this your car?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "Uzo, how? When?" People nearby glanced at them, but Tiwa barely noticed. Uzo met her eyes calmly. "Don't worry," he said. "You'll understand soon." Tiwa stood there for several seconds, her mind spinning. This was not the man she remembered. This was not the life she understood. Slowly, she stepped into the car. As the door closed, her heart pounded. Who is this man now? The first stop was a salon. Tiwa protested immediately. "Uzo, this place—" "Just go in," he said gently. "Please." She sat. Her hair was washed, treated, styled with care she wasn't used to. As she watched her reflection change in the mirror, her eyes widened. When she finally stood up, she barely recognized herself. Next came shopping. A dress, shoes, a handbag. Each time she tried to refuse, Uzo simply shook his head. "Choose what you like," he said calmly. "Don't rush." By the time they left the store, Tiwa felt overwhelmed, like she was walking inside a dream she hadn't asked for. Evening settled as they arrived at a quiet, elegant restaurant. Soft lights glowed. Gentle music played in the background. Tiwa sat carefully, hands folded, still trying to understand everything that had happened in a single day. Dinner was served. They ate quietly. Then Uzo placed his cutlery down. "Tiwa," he said, looking directly at her, "do you remember when I used to eat at your stall and promised to pay later?" She nodded slowly. "You never embarrassed me," he continued. "You never treated me like I was less than a man." Tiwa swallowed. "I was just being kind." Uzo shook his head. "You were being rare." He reached into his pocket. Tiwa's breath caught. Uzo stood up. The room grew quiet. "Tiwa," he said, his voice steady but deep with emotion. "Everything I have today started with someone who believed in me when I had nothing. I don't want to walk into the future without you." He opened the box. A ring. Tiwa gasped, covering her mouth as tears filled her eyes. "I love you," Uzo said. "Marry me." For a moment, she couldn't speak. Then she nodded, crying. "Yes," she whispered.
Yes.
Uzo slid the ring onto her finger. Applause filled the room, but Tiwa barely heard it. Her mind was still at the G-Wagon, still at the mystery, still trying to understand how one ordinary afternoon had changed her life forever. And as they walked out hand in hand, Tiwa knew one thing for certain. This was only the beginning. The wedding was nothing short of grand. It was the kind of wedding people talked about long after it ended. The venue glowed with soft lights and elegant decor. Well-known names filled the seats, business associates, society figures, friends from different worlds Uzo had crossed. Tiwa walked down the aisle, feeling like she was floating. Her heart was full, her hands trembling slightly as she held Uzo's. She did not understand everything that was happening around her, but she understood one thing clearly. Her life had changed. After the celebration, there was no time to rest. Almost immediately, Uzo took Tiwa to the airport. "Paris," he told her simply. Tiwa thought she misheard him, but Paris was real. For 3 days, the city wrapped her in lights, beauty, and freedom. Luxury hotels, long walks, restaurants where food arrived like art. Shops where attendants smiled and waited patiently as she tried on clothes she never imagined owning. Tiwa had never tasted wealth before, not like this. And it entered her fast. She bought dresses without checking prices, shoes because they were beautiful, bags because they felt soft in her hands. Each time she hesitated, Uzo waved it away calmly. "Enjoy yourself," he said. "You deserve it." By the time they flew back to Nigeria, Tiwa felt like she had stepped out of one world and into another entirely. When they arrived at the Ikoyi mansion, Tiwa stood at the gate in disbelief. The house was quiet, large, and commanding. Glass, stone, space. Security greeted them respectfully. The doors opened, and Tiwa walked in slowly, her eyes widening as she took everything in. "This is our house?" she asked. Uzo nodded. "Yes." Tiwa laughed, then gasped, then laughed again. She moved from room to room, touching walls, opening doors, staring at ceilings. She couldn't contain herself. She was wild with excitement. Everything felt unreal, too clean, too calm, too perfect. Uzo watched her with a small smile, amused but observant. Wealth had entered Tiwa's life quickly, too quickly to be understood. Later that afternoon, there was a knock on the door. Tiwa adjusted her dress and walked over to open it. 3 women stood outside. They were dressed well, expensive but controlled. Their posture was confident. Their eyes scanned Tiwa before their smiles appeared. The first woman stepped forward. "I'm Mrs. Adeyemi," she said, her voice firm, almost commanding. "We live 2 houses down." The second woman smiled widely. "I'm Mrs. Lawson. Welcome to the estate." The third woman nodded quietly. "Mrs. Balogun." Tiwa smiled warmly. "I'm Tiwa. Please come in." They stepped inside, their heels clicking softly against the floor as they looked around. "Beautiful house," Mrs. Adeyemi said, slowly. "Very beautiful." Mrs. Lawson laughed lightly. "Ikoyi houses don't come cheap these days." Mrs. Balogun said nothing. She only observed. "We heard about the wedding," Mrs. Adeyemi continued. "Quite impressive." "Very impressive," Mrs. Lawson added. "Your husband must be doing extremely well." Tiwa nodded, unsure how to respond. "We have a women's association here," Mrs. Adeyemi said. "Estate meetings, mostly wives. Important wives." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You should attend," Mrs. Lawson added. "It's good to belong." Tiwa felt something tighten in her chest, though she couldn't explain why. "I'll let my husband know," she replied politely. Mrs. Adeyemi nodded once. "Please do." They turned to leave almost immediately, as if they had seen all they needed to see. As the door closed behind them, Tiwa exhaled slowly. Something about the visit unsettled her. Uzo walked up beside her. "Who was that?" "Neighbors," Tiwa replied. "Mrs. Adeyemi, Mrs. Lawson, and Mrs. Balogun." Uzo nodded distractedly, still focused on his phone. "That's good." He asked no questions. Tiwa didn't push further. That night, as she lay in the large bedroom, Tiwa replayed the women's faces in her mind. Their smiles, their eyes, their words. Wealth had welcomed her with open arms, but it had also placed her under watch, and Tiwa did not yet know that this was only the beginning. The morning was calm in the Ikoyi estate. Tiwa tied her sneakers and stepped out to jog. The road was quiet, lined with trimmed hedges and tall gates. She had barely gone far when someone slowed down behind her. "Good morning," a man said. Tiwa turned. He had stopped jogging and turned back toward her. "I'm Kunle," he said with an easy smile. "I noticed you earlier." "Good morning," Tiwa replied politely. "You're new here," Kunle added,
glancing at her appreciatively.
"and very beautiful." Tiwa smiled briefly but kept jogging. Kunle laughed. "Can I take you out sometime?" Tiwa stopped, lifted her hand calmly, and showed him her ring. "I'm married." Kunle stared at the ring for a second, then sighed dramatically. "Why are the beautiful ones always married?" he said, shaking his head. Tiwa laughed lightly. "We can be friends." Kunle smiled. "I'll take friendship." They jogged a little more, exchanged a few casual words, then parted ways. That was all. Later that day, Tiwa prepared for the women's meeting. She took her time. She dressed deliberately, elegant, confident, unmissable. Her hair was perfectly styled. Her outfit was clean, expensive, and intentional. She did not rush. She arrived late, very late. When Tiwa finally walked into the meeting hall, conversations stopped. Chairs shifted. Eyes lifted. She walked in calmly, unbothered. Before she could take her seat, Mrs. Adeyemi stood up sharply. "You're late," she said coldly. "That's unacceptable here." The room went quiet. Tiwa looked at her, then smiled calmly. "Good afternoon. I'm Tiwa." Mrs. Adeyemi did not sit. "There's a fine for lateness, $100. A few women nodded in agreement. Tiwa paused, then reached into her bag. She pulled out her card. $2,000, she said evenly. The room stirred. Mrs. Adeyemi frowned. "What for?" Tiwa smiled. "For future lateness." Gasps followed. Some women rolled their eyes. "This one will be troublesome," someone whispered. Another murmured, "She thinks money solves everything." But across the room, Mrs. Lawson smiled. She liked Tiwa immediately. Tiwa took her seat without further explanation. The meeting continued, but the atmosphere had changed. Tiwa didn't speak much. She didn't need to. Her entrance had already spoken for her. By the end of the meeting, everyone knew one thing clearly. She would not be bullied. That evening, Tiwa returned home feeling satisfied. Uzo was seated in the living room when she walked in. "So," he asked casually, "how did the meeting go?" Tiwa smiled. "Interesting." Uzo looked up. "Interesting how?" She dropped her bag and sat comfortably. "They tried to intimidate me. One of them fined me for coming late." Uzo frowned slightly. "And?" "I paid," Tiwa said calmly. "I paid $2,000, told them it was for future lateness." Uzo laughed softly, shaking his head. "You." "They know now," Tiwa continued. "They know I'm your wife." Uzo nodded, still amused. Then his tone shifted, gentler, thoughtful. "But Tiwa," he said, "I don't want all this to become your focus." She looked at him. "I don't think this show-off lifestyle should worry you," Uzo continued. "You've worked hard your whole life. I don't mind if you want to rest and be comfortable in your home." Tiwa smiled, relieved. "But," Uzo added, leaning forward slightly, "I don't want idleness to trap you." She listened. "What kind of business would you like to start?" he asked calmly. "Anything at all. Tell me, and I'll establish it immediately." Tiwa blinked. "A business?" "Yes," Uzo said. "Something that's yours. Something that keeps your mind active. I don't mind. I just don't want you bored or empty." Tiwa smiled slowly. "I'll think about it." Uzo nodded. "Take your time." They sat in comfortable silence. Neither of them knew it yet, but that simple conversation, loving, harmless, well-intended, would later become the very thing people twisted against her. And that was how the trap began. Uzo was in his office when his secretary announced visitors. "Sir, your brother and sister are here." Uzo frowned slightly. They hadn't informed him beforehand, but he nodded. "Let them in." Moments later, his elder sister and younger brother walked into the office. Their faces were tight, serious, the kind of seriousness that made the room feel smaller. After the usual greetings, they did not waste time. "Uzo," his sister began, sitting forward, "you've changed." Uzo raised an eyebrow. "Changed how?" "You don't come around anymore," his brother added. "You barely call. Everything is now about your wife." Uzo leaned back in his chair, calm. "I'm married. I'm also busy. That's not a crime." His sister exchanged a look with their brother. Then she spoke again, lowering her voice. "We didn't come on our own," she said. "We came because of what our pastor told us." Uzo's expression hardened slightly. "What pastor?" "The man of God we pray with," his brother replied. "He said your wife has bewitched you." Uzo laughed once, sharply. "That's nonsense." His sister shook her head. "Listen first. The pastor said she has caged you inside a bottle, that she's controlling you, that your love for her is unnatural." Uzo's laughter died. "And that her plan," his brother continued, "is to kill you one day, run away with your properties, and marry a younger man." The room went silent. Uzo stood up slowly.
You think I'm foolish enough to believe this?
"We're not saying we believe it," his sister said quickly. "We're saying you should be careful." Uzo paced the room, jaw tight. "This is insulting." The brother raised his hands. "The pastor said if you think they're lying, you should put her to a test." Uzo stopped walking. "A test?" he repeated. "Yes," his sister said. "Watch her when things are no longer comfortable. See her true heart." Uzo didn't respond immediately. He dismissed them shortly after, his face unreadable. But when the door closed behind them, their words remained. A test. While Uzo was at work, Tiwa's phone buzzed repeatedly. Kunle. She hesitated before replying. Since their jog that morning, he had been unusually attentive. Compliments, jokes, casual check-ins. She told herself it meant nothing. Still, she found herself smiling at some of his messages. Her mind drifted briefly, only briefly, before she shook it off. She was married. That evening, Uzo returned home earlier than expected. His mood was quiet, thoughtful. As they ate, his phone rang. He answered, listened, then stood up abruptly. "I have to go to Port Harcourt," he said. Tiwa looked up, startled. "Tonight?" "There's an emergency with one of the containers," Uzo replied. "I have to be there immediately." Tiwa frowned. "Why not tomorrow morning?" Uzo shook his head. "It can't wait." He packed quickly. Tiwa followed him into the bedroom, concern written all over her face. "Please be careful," she said. Uzo kissed her forehead. "I will." They hugged. They kissed again. Then he left. The house felt too quiet afterward. Minutes later, Tiwa's phone buzzed. "Kunle. There's a house party in the estate tonight," the message read. "You should come. Don't be alone." Tiwa stared at the screen. She was bored, alone. Her husband had just traveled unexpectedly. After a moment's hesitation, she replied, "Okay." The house party was lively. Music, drinks, laughter. Tiwa tried to relax, telling herself she was only there to pass time. She drank more than she intended. Kunle stayed close. Too close. He laughed loudly, leaned in when he spoke, placed his hand casually on her arm. Tiwa felt tipsy, her judgment slightly blurred. She didn't push him away immediately. That was the moment Mrs. Lawson noticed. From across the room, Mrs. Lawson watched quietly. She raised her phone, snapping pictures, short videos, enough to tell a story, whether true or not. She sent them immediately. To Uzo. Uzo had not left the city yet. When the images came in, his world stopped. He stared at the screen. Tiwa, laughing. Kunle too close, arms brushing, smiles that looked wrong. Without a word, Uzo cancelled the trip. He turned the car around. When Tiwa returned home later that night, the house was dark. She stepped inside and froze. Uzo sat on the couch, waiting. Her heart dropped. "Where are you coming from?" he asked quietly. Tiwa swallowed. "A house party." "With who?" Uzo asked. "By myself," she replied quickly. Uzo stood up and walked toward her. He held up his phone. Then who is this? Tiwa's knees buckled. She dropped to the floor immediately, crying. Uzo, please, it's not what you think. Let me explain. She sobbed, apologizing, begging. I was bored. I drank a little. I didn't do anything. Please believe me. Uzo listened in silence. After a long moment, he sighed. Stand up, he said. Tiwa rose slowly, tears streaming down her face. I forgive you, Uzo said. Relief flooded her instantly. But inside Uzo, something shifted. As Tiwa went to bed that night, believing the storm had passed, Uzo sat alone in the living room, thinking about the words his siblings spoke, about the pastor, about the test. And quietly, carefully, Uzo made a decision. The real test was about to begin. The next morning, Uzo stood in the living room with his phone pressed to his ear. His voice was loud, shaky, panicked. My containers? What do you mean they caught fire? He shouted. No, those were my biggest consignments. Tiwa rushed out of the bedroom immediately. What happened? She asked, fear written all over her face. Uzo turned toward her slowly, his face pale. My 2 containers, he said, his voice breaking. They caught fire on the ship, inside the sea. Tiwa froze. Fire? Uzo nodded weakly. Everything is gone. I pulled out all my savings, every resource I had. That deal was supposed to secure everything. Tiwa's hands began to tremble. Are you saying we're broke? She asked quietly. Uzo's knees gave